buenas tardes tengan todos. Seguimos en este segundo Foro Internacional de Innovación en la Justicia. Ha sido muy evidente cómo la tecnología no es un asunto blanco-negro, sino que implica muchísimos retos al momento de su adopción y ahí el secreto, los retos para la innovación. La adopción de la tecnología es necesaria para hacer un acercamiento a la justicia. Y sobre esto, nuestro siguiente panel de tecnología e Internet para una verdadera justicia expedita. Moderan Yolanda Cuevas, directora jurídica de TOGIL. Participan Julián Culter, de Google México, Anne-Catherine Riedel, de la Fundación Friedrich Naumann, y César Rodrigo Landa Arroyo, de la Pontificia Universidad Católica del Perú, de la Universidad Nacional Mayor de San Marcos y del Tribunal Constitucional de Perú. Muchas gracias. Le cedo la palabra a Yolanda Cuevas.
We apologize, in the booth we do not have sound.
Yolanda, tenemos un problema. No te estás escuchando. ¿Podemos activar y desactivar tu micrófono, por favor?
¿Me escuchan ahora?
Sí. Listo, adelante.
Adelante. Muy buenas tardes a todos y a todas. Bienvenidas al segundo Foro de Innovación en la Justicia. Soy directora de la Asociación Civil TOGIL. Es un honor estar el día de hoy con ustedes compartiendo una mesa denominada Tecnología e Internet para una verdadera justicia expedita. La pandemia, como saben, del COVID-19 cambió mucho los paradigmas que al menos en México estaban profundamente asentados en la aplicación de justicia. En la actualidad, gracias a diversas transformaciones del Estado y las exigencias de la sociedad, las tecnologías y el Internet se han convertido en el fundamento principal para la construcción de una nueva identidad de los derechos fundamentales, pero sobre todo una justicia expedita. Es grato para mí el día de hoy contar con dos grandes ponentes en esta mesa para compartir sus experiencias y conocimientos en materia de digitalización y acceso a la justicia, como es el Internet y cómo la tecnología reduce las brechas y desigualdades en una sociedad. En primer lugar, quiero mencionar que nos acompaña nuestra querida y reconocida Anne-Catherine Riedel, experta en comunicación estratégica y directora de la división
and director of the division of global topics of digitalization and innovation of the foundation, Friedrich Haumann. Thank you for being with us. Likewise, we have the presence of Cesar Rodrigo Landa Arroyo, former president of the Constitutional Court of Peru, and he has been the judge of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, and also he has worked in the Pontifical Catholic University of Peru and the major University of San Marcos. Doctor, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. And as we have very little time then for your interventions, and we want to leverage all of your experience and around these two topics, both in terms of internet and access to justice, by Dr. Landa, as well as, of course, the long experience of our dear Catherine in terms of fiscalization, innovation, and how this is going to be impacting society, and I mean social media. And I want to deepen the questions and topics that are going to be answered in your presentations. And first of all, I want to go and say how we can use the new technologies and internet in the improvement of criminal justice system. And number two, how can we benefit from the solution of conflicts, of online conflicts? And number three, and third important question, how is the digital gap bridged with the use of new technologies, and which initiatives can be used to help reduce this? And I will first give the floor to our dear Catherine, so she can start with this such an important
Thank you, Yolanda, and thank you for the invitation. And good evening from Berlin in Germany. Yes, my name is Ann-Kathrin Riedel, and I'm working at the Friedrich Naumann Foundation as manager for digitalization and innovation. And so I'm working mainly on digital policies, not digitalization in general. So I don't create apps or stuff like that. And we're focusing a lot on platform regulation, what we can do against hate speech on social media, for example, but also against disinformation, especially the one which is unlawful. So we try this, and we need to do this to ensure freedom of speech also in the digital sphere. And I think to ensure freedom of speech, we also need to enforce the law in the digital sphere. I think that's a very, very important topic. And today I brought to you some thoughts, also perspectives from Germany to this panel, which I hope gives you some impression of our work at the foundation, but also state of the art here in Germany. So I am not a lawyer, so I don't have expertise in law or the justice system also here in Germany in detail. But as I said, I want to bring some perspectives and thoughts with you. So my work is mainly focused on ensuring civil liberties, mostly from the civil society perspective. And therefore I'm advocating, for tools or technology that actually helps the justice system and the police to do a better job, and respectively an adequate job in the 21st century. I think that's super important. But when I look at my country, at Germany, we often say here, and especially a lot of politicians, well, the internet is not a lawless space. And in fact, it is not a lawless space. So the law has to it has to be implemented and enforced also in this digital sphere. And because there are some new crimes or crimes in a different way in the digital sphere, politicians and lawmakers often invent new ways or ideas to solve crimes in the digital sphere. They think of ideas like data retention. Oftentimes here in Germany, even though our court for the constitution repeals it. And I think it's a very bad idea, because we have a proverb here in Germany, what's in English? We need to find the needle in a haystack, but with a data retention law, we make a much bigger haystack. We create more and more data, and we are not able to find problematic data, problematic information, especially from criminals or terrorists. So we have a big problem here, and it doesn't really solve problems. Same with spyware or state trojans, which politicians often want to implement. But we saw just recently with the Israeli company NSO and the Pegasus spyware, it often affects human rights activists, journalists, and so on, and not really criminals. So spyware is often, nearly every time, and a problem when it comes to human rights and also cybersecurity. And also, we often have information that the police needs to solve a problem, like open source in the internet. For example, we had a right-wing terrorist attack a few years ago here in Germany in Halle, an anti-Semitic terrorist attack. And the terrorist, he really planned his attack online in open source form. So it was not in a so-called dark web or behind encrypted chats or whatever. And if the police would be trained better, they could have seen it and saw it. They don't need some invasive tools to find criminals. So what can we do to prepare the justice system and the police better to do a better job in the digital sphere? And instead of using tools or making laws for data retention, spyware, and so on, which is often against civil liberties and often human rights, I think we need to do more more basic stuff, also here in Germany. So first of all, we need to train our staff in the police and the justice system better. Often they don't have any expertise when it comes to the digital sphere, the internet, how technology works, and so on. We also need to digitalize the justice system itself. So we often talk about e-government here in Germany and how to digitalize our administration, but not enough to digitalize our courts and police stations and give them tools like basic tools like digital files and so on. So they can solve problems in the digital sphere when they aren't able to receive data, for example, or have the capacity to save the data. And that's really a problem often here in Germany. Also, when it comes to specialists like data forensics or forensics for the digital sphere in general, often the police can check smartphones they got from terrorists or criminals because they don't have the manpower with forensics to check it. A second or third point is salary. We need to pay them adequately because we have a huge competition with the economy. They also searching specialists for all the cyber stuff and forensic and so on. And so we need to raise the salary for people who want to work in the justice system or in the administration who are really specialized in this field. And you asked me in advance also if we need to find new ways for dispute resolution. And I think we need to do it, especially when it comes to hate speech, because we have so much possible crimes. We don't know it. A court has to decide if it's a crime or not. And we need to have quicker judgments and solutions for this. So we need to rethink if we can use, for example, e-courts. And I think that's a way where we need to think more about if we can implement this and speed up trials and so on. And of course, we need to use technology to make the system of the justical system more transparent and control it better. I think we need to talk also about live streaming of courts so that everyone can attend a court ruling which is open by itself, but just if you live in the city and are able to go into the courtroom. And we need to create databases that are really open data and searchable throughout all the courts. So that's not the standard, for example, here in Germany. Databases that are easy to access and searchable through all the courts we have here in Germany. So as I said, we need to use technology to improve the justice system, but we need to use it carefully. So it's not good to just use spyware to like find criminals or stuff like that. I think we need to focus on technology that ensures human rights and civil liberties. Because technology itself won't solve any problem. I think we need to keep this in mind all the time, but technology can help us to do a better job. Also, algorithms can help us, but we never should use algorithms in decision-making against humans. So we can use algorithms also in the justice system, for example, to help us sort information or to replace repetitive tasks and so on. But if we use algorithms, especially in this area, we need to make them transparent, and we have a civil society and involve civil society to have a critical view on these algorithms. So as I said, technology support and not replace the human being and the human decision making also in the justice system, but it's super important to solve the challenges we have in the 21st century and to improve also our justical system, and with the help of technology, but yeah, we need to think really where we need technology and where it's better to not use it. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, querida Catherine.
Much, Catherine. It's very important what you just mentioned. Indeed, the creation and implementation of technologies allows us to apply a more transparent and efficient technologies that reaches the citizenship, but especially the technological approach that guarantees fundamental rights, and obviously how we can do a better job with the implementation of these technologies that allows us to innovate and be closer to citizenship. I would like to thank you. Thank you very much for this group of ideas that are so important. I think that in Mexico, we are still facing great challenges in innovation. Thank you very much, Catherine. And we will now give the floor to Dr. Elanda. Doctor, I would like to emphasize in your intervention, how can we use the new technologies on the internet for a better criminal justice system? Good afternoon. Thank you very much for this invitation from the Foundation Mexico Evalúa and also the Foundation Friedrich Naumann Stiftung in order to present these ideas for this topic. Specifically, because of my professional training, my constitutional experience, which is the one that has led me to reflect on the protection and freedoms, especially those referred to digital rights. We live in a society in which communication and technology, specifically with the pandemic, as you mentioned in the introduction, it has led to a transformation of the justice system, specifically in the experience of constitutional justice, which may be also in charge of reviewing resolutions in criminal matters that a jurisdictional organization can issue. And regarding the constitutional processes that originate, for instance, in Mexico, the writ of amparo or habeas corpus or habeas data, they have rights and freedoms in the judicial way that in case these are other resolutions, they can be part of the constitutional area. In that regard, since a few years ago, there is a great importance from the digital media that allow more agile operations for the citizen requiring the service, but also in the judicial acts, reducing the human activity, reducing costs as well, and allowing them to be more transparent and more equal for the creation of justice, when we can have these virtual mechanisms of access to it. We can participate in the processes such as the follow-up to the judicial rulings. For instance, in 2019, it started working, even before the pandemic, what we call the virtual part table. In that moment, we could have written complaints and we could also have them virtually. And this allowed that in that moment, the largest amount of complaints came from Lima, the capital of the country. And this was a 60%. And due to the pandemic, this has changed. 60% of the actions that come to the Constitutional Court come from outside the capital, from the different areas, which means that there is a greater access to judicial procedures because we avoid the movement from one place to another in order to present a claim and the need to go to the court that has the headquarters in Lima. And there has also been the authorization of the digital signature or electronic signature. So in 2020, there was a regularization for the access reception and procedure of the digital files where citizenship can have access to the system and know what the process they are in is. And there are also some hearings because of this inability of being in person. Both the lawyers of the different parties and even the interested people are able to see virtually these hearings in order to hear the argumentations of the parties. And this has allowed access for the people to perform their oral presentations. But the most significant part here is that the virtual capability right now of these hearings has allowed people to hear this live streaming in some significant cases. For instance, before the corruption in 2019, the president dissolved the Congress based on a foreseen constitutional framework, and this was a judicial controversy, and it created a conflict of competencies in which the whole citizenship, before this fact that had not seen before, in order to face the corruption from a constitutional framework, people wanted to hear the argumentations from both parts, and the Constitutional Court ruled that this Congress should be dissolved. But not only do we have hearings, but we also have these electronic files that I mentioned, which are very important. And also, these rulings should be registered digitally in the website of the Constitutional Court. And from this information, they systematize the case law based on different criteria, whether it is because of the rights, because of the freedoms, and other constitutional concepts. And any citizen may have access to the website and find, starting with one word, the thing they are interested in, starting from the ruling as well. And this also expands to reach the databases of other courts, such as the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, that allows us to reach this information from other constitutional courts as well. And I think it's important to see that there is a possibility of improving the system, because of course there is a better use of the justice services through constitutional application of these virtual systems, as well as its scope, virtual hearings, as the electronic signature, digital files, as I was mentioning, and also case law. The important thing about this is that there are rural areas in the country that do not have access to interconnectivity systems. Because even though there is a network of optic fiber network for the most vulnerable groups, there are no options for them to be incorporated. So I think that it is important that we have different policies to improve access of the population so that they can maintain the constitutional justice in order to approach those who have access to these services. But there are also other policies to have more interconnectivity and give people, low-income people, the instruments, that maybe the hardware or the software for vulnerable people, so that they are not vulnerable or discriminated. I think we have a whole world ahead. And if you allow me to talk about internet connectivity and even robotics, that little by little are taking countries to new places. So it's important that we give these leaps towards new technologies, these fourth generation technologies without displacing people, but considering to integrate those who are alienated. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Doctor, for your great participation. And before closing this panel on the internet technology to guarantee a true justice, I would like to finish with this important question, and I hope you can both give me your opinions. How do you conceptualize the hate speech for it to be applied in this virtual globalized environment? I will repeat it. How do we take into account hate speech to be applied in this globalized virtual environment?
¿Me escucharon, perdón?
Sí.
El tema de las tecnologías y obviamente...
Regarding technologies and how we can use them. And Catherine, do you have something to say? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Sí, muchas gracias.
You know, when it comes to hate speech online and platform regulation, for example, first of all, as I said, we need to rethink, or not rethink, but try to find ways how we can improve our justical systems or make them fit for the digital age. So there are some people, lawyers who are trained in law, I'm not, who think about things like e-courts and stuff like that. And I think that sounds often interesting, but I'm not an expert on this. But I think when it comes to hate speech, we also need to focus on something else, because even though we have perfect systems, technology that will support lawyers, judges to rule about hate speech, there will always be massive hate speech online, because I think people in general are good, but there are also a lot of people who have fun insulting people. So what can we do against hate speech? And I think there we need to focus on the systems, on how platforms work. And that also showed us the whistleblower Frances Haugen just recently with her Facebook papers. We need to focus on the algorithms that make hate big, that spread hate on social media platforms, such as on Facebook or Instagram, YouTube, or whatsoever, because I think there is also a lot of, like we say, music where you can regulate stuff, because we will never bring all of the hate we have online in front of a court. So we need to adapt or do a little bit more on different stages when it comes to hate online, and especially educate people that, as I said, the digital sphere is not a lawless space, and that they will that it will affect them, like physically, the victim, and also the people who write hate in the internet and insult people, and they have to recognize and feel the justical system.
Muchas gracias, nuestra querida Catherine. No sé si tenga algún comentario. Doctor César, para cerrar, por favor.
Do you have any comments? Yes, hate speech is classified in the international treaties, in the International Inter-American Commission of Human Rights, in different areas such as violence and discrimination. Having these regulations related to freedom of speech in digital media, this is very sensitive, but it's not impossible to have a certain control where there are violations to freedom of speech. But in the legislations, we can also have different regulations, such as Anne-Catherine mentioned, because the designers of artificial intelligence and algorithms are people, and they may have the capabilities and the training to have these adjusted to the legal framework of each country and to identify hate speech, which is something that happened with Trump, who was expelled from some platforms, which has also allowed to move the state divisions to the great digital platforms who are going to determine who will be able to establish the boundaries of freedom of speech and the implementation of ideologies. So I think that the states are moving forward with digital platforms, but for instance, Facebook has created a lot of things to assess this. And I think the state, not only individually, we require an international treaty, a specific agreement on this hate speech. And I think that there are going to be countries that are more sensitive or less sensitive to these topics, because I know that we have different democracies all over the world. But we require an international consensus to, I believe, create this under the different values of democracy so that we can avoid hate speech or investigate with the due process and penalize or remove people from these platforms as it should correspond. Thank you very much to both of you, Catherine and Dr. Landa, for your great experience. This was a great panel. We need to finish, and I want to thank Mexico Evalúa and the Foundation for these enriching panels, and everyone have a great afternoon. Thank you.